Hello, friends, family, and keepers of the true faith, and welcome to another Ep44 Blog. This is episode 44 or blog 44, and it is date stamped 25th of December 2022. And you haven't guessed, it's Christmas. It's actually Christmas Day. And just like I said, I would record my blogs on the day that it was going to be broadcast, and it's a week ending blog, the week ending being Sunday, so you now know it's Sunday and Christmas Day, and we must have a look at that and say what a wonderful day Christmas Day is. A lot of you guys have been working damn hard and have wanted to just have that day where you settle back with a big roast dinner, those chocolates and salted peanuts while you're watching the Christmas television. You've got your radio times in front of you. You've circled all the stuff you want to watch. All that lovely stuff. And then, of course, the magic of having children or family around and sitting on the sofa, getting the presents from underneath the tree and opening them all up. Big smiles. And you suddenly have nothing under the tree, and each of you have all got little piles of presents next to your feet. If you're a little kiddie, you probably have run already upstairs, and you've got your game cartridge or CD or Blu-ray ready to play the game, and hating the moment that somebody shouts up the stairs, time to come down, it's dinner time. All of those things, they've happened to me. And I think the difficulty probably with getting old or moving forward is, for me, the magic is less so. But we're not going to dwell upon all of that, because I think everybody, even when they're enjoying their Christmas dinner, when they're going to be watching the King's speech later on, there'll be enough reflection time on all those people that are still out on the streets, sleeping rough, are in relationships that are abusive, and all of those horrible, nasty things that are going on in the world, which brings me basically to the news, which is how I start off my blog, don't I, every week, because the war still continues. So we'll get this out the way really quick, because we're only about 3 minutes in. I've never got to it that quick before. The Ukraine's armed forces on Wednesday downed 4 Russian helicopters in 18 minutes in the south of the country. The helicopters were said to be providing fire support to ground occupation troops. There wasn't really much in the news for Ukraine, because they already mentioned the week before that there would be no truce. There was no sitting around a table planned to discuss anything. And from that point of view, you knew that it was just going to be any other day for them. So from my point of view, to those people that are out there fighting, I'm so sorry you're going to miss the magic of Christmas and what it all means. But as far as I'm concerned, I do hope this war ends as quickly as it possibly can. It's not going to happen for the new year, but let's have the war finished before 2024. And by the way, you mentioned that number when you're in 2022, but we're only a week away to 2023, and a year goes damn quick for me, I can tell you. In world news, Santa completed his mission by rewarding everyone on the nice list. In an exclusive message to me, Santa said he was tired, but very, very privileged to be able to spread joy to the world. And he now is feeling very cream crackered, and he's looking forward to a nice 40 winks and the King's Speech. I think that was lovely for him to come up to me and have an exclusive interview. Thought it was very, very, very nice of him. And really, that brings us straight away to shout-outs. I've got a funny feeling this one's going to be quite a short blog today. The shout-outs. These are people, as you know, and it's one of my favourite sections because it's people that have, for some unknown reason, they've my name has come up in their brain and said, "Oh, I must go and watch that blog," and then left a comment, and that makes me feel very happy. It means I'm being thought of for a start. That I don't usually have many people go, "Oh, I thought of you and I'm giving you a call," or anything like that. So it's very great to get a comment. So I always do my shout outs to all those people that do. So this week we've got Wee Bob Art, Steve's Gaming, Jambon, Martroid, Robert's Retro Gaming, Rocket Bunny, Milfy Swimbuckle, Denny, Highlander, GTB Films, Down the Rabbit Hole, and then, although not a comment, I got a lovely call from Mainmeister yesterday. He was on his way, because he's a very busy person at Christmas. You know how busy it is when you've got a daughter and you've got a girlfriend, and he was on his way to do his special stuff, and he wanted to wish me a Merry Christmas verbally, which was very, very nice. I always appreciate all of that, and that touched me very much. It put a big smile on my face. Hearing another voice is great. And usually after I do the shout outs, I do the questions, so we might as well do that now, and I think I've got some. So these are in no particular order. It's what I think it's probably the last one that's left a comment, because this particular one here says that the comment was left just over a day ago. So the first one at the top of the list is Denny. Denny always has a lot to say, and it's great because he can give sometimes either agree or he can give an alternative take of what he feels on what was being said. So he started off wishing my mother well and myself. He talked a little bit about Gary Glitter, which I don't, as you probably watched in the blog last week. I don't think anybody wants to dwell on those people that do such atrocities as they've done. It angers me, I have to say, that he is coming out early. But I also have to understand that I work in and quite closely in the past with the probation team, and I do know that there are people that want to turn their life around. It's just in the case of Gary Glitter, I find that, or Paul Gadd, I find that incredibly hard to believe. But anyway, we won't dwell on that. It's Christmas, my God, Christmas. So he agreed with me about all of the TV programs. He mentioned some of the films that he watched himself. And then his question is there a Holy Grail title or titles you'd like to see released on Blu-ray or 4K? That's a tricky question, believe it or not. There's you're getting very, 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 very good at coming up with tricky ones for me, because as you know, film and TV is quite important to me. You know, I sometimes am quite proud of myself of remembering dates when I saw them, what I was doing when I saw them, what was going on in the world when all of that, when I watched that particular film. So is there a Holy Grail title or titles that you'd like to release on Blu-ray or 4K? I think we've been very lucky this year in that some of the stuff we thought would never come out has come out. I think we've got one to look forward to next year, which has been on one of the most wanted lists, which is The Abyss. Now, I've been lucky to have The Abyss on VHS. I then had it on Laserdisc. I had the extended version on Laserdisc. I had it on DVD. But for some unknown reason, well, I don't think it's unknown, but I think it's to do with who owns it and the fact that the studio that made it went bust. The Abyss never really got a high definition Blu-ray or 4K release, and I believe it is just now around the corner. So again, another one to cross off the list. And I don't think there are many other holy grails that I can think off the top of my head. Like I say, I've been very, very blessed. You know, I've got in my collection things like Ray Harryhausen collections, where they've stuck all of his stop motion photography films in one box set. You know, I've had Kubrick collections, Hitchcock collections, you know, and there are singular films that I wish I could see again, but then when I look, I find it actually is released. It's just I haven't looked that closely. I was very happy 6 years ago that I was thinking about the film Flight of the Doves. I put my soundtrack album on and was reminiscing about watching that film as a kiddie, and found out it was released on DVD, but now it's out of circulation. It's very, very difficult to get hold of. But I then looked through my collection and I actually had it. So again, it's very difficult then to go, well, what are you missing? And I find it very nice that each week I look at the press and find out what's being released this week, or I'm on the mailing list of certain groups like Zavvi and Amazon that tell me pre-orders that are coming out, and there will be one gem that I've forgotten about, you know, that I'll go, oh my god, that's coming out, I've forgotten all about that film. And that's the thing that sparks my memory and goes, right, I'm putting that down. So I don't naturally, when somebody says, have you got a holy grail that you want to come out, because I'm always going to get caught out and say, well, that's out. What are you going on about? So I'm so sorry that it's a bit of a lackluster answer, but purely it's lackluster just because we're blessed and that we're getting so many new releases every month. It's very hard sometimes for people to get caught up with it all and have enough money to buy them, especially in these hard times. But I hope that's a good enough answer. The next one down the list is GTB Films. So he was telling me about meeting people, famous people, and then he comes to the question, right? Quick question for next time, prompted by my wife glancing at this video and saying, is that Russell T Davies you're watching? So I take it what you're saying is that your missus thinks I look like Russell T Davies. Wish I had his money. Have you ever been mistaken for someone famous? If not, have you ever met anyone famous? And if so, were they the same as you expected? Mine are Cliff Richard in Hampton Court Maze. Very full of himself. Oh dear, I'm sorry to hear that. It goes on a little bit there about, see, very full of himself. Asked for our cameras so we could take a photo of ourselves for us. And Tom Baker, well, I'm not sure what he was like because I was struck dumb, yeah. So you're a little bit like me. If you do meet someone by accident, you go all tongue-tied. if you're just about to be introduced to them, your brain goes like jelly and your mind just empties. But I think we know, I've mentioned in the last couple of blogs about I'm meeting Elton John. I've met Colin Baker. I have met Tom Baker at a convention. There's lots of conventions where you can actually meet people. But with Colin Baker, it was quite special because I managed to be able to sit down next to him and have a nice chat. It was the end of the convention. He was packing up. I'd got there to him quite late because of the queues for everything else. And we had a nice chinwag. So, he asked me what I'd seen of him. What was the first thing I'd seen him in? You see, and this is where your brain goes to mush. You go, oh, God. But I clearly remembered seeing him in The Brothers. So I mentioned The Brothers. And he went, you're too young to see The Brothers, aren't you? And I happened to remind him that was a programme that was on in my house on a Sunday, and my mother watched it, and we had to watch what the family was watching. And he went, yes, of course, different time. And then we got into the Doctor Who questions, So it's sort of like eased in. It's amazing how a question that you might find difficult suddenly opens up into easier questions later on. So I hope that's answered that GTB for you. And then we get to Robert's Retro Gaming. So he wished me well for Christmas. Hope my mum was okay. He said, and this was quite weird, that the Tomorrow People was one that he loved as a young kid because Robert's in Canada. I don't know whether he's ever lived in Britain, but I dare say Thames TV or ITV probably did market that 70s show over to Canada and foreign countries. I know that they did that with Thunderbirds and Anything by Lou Grade, the Randall and Hopkirks, the Persuaders, the Saint, the Protectors. So it's not hard to think that that's happened. And then his question, it says a specific one this time, as you seem to have a much better memory for your earlier years than I do. And he specifically states, when you were 8 years old, what was your favourite animated thing, TV or movie? I'm not quite sure why 8 years old is specific, but I'm sure he'll fill me in. But let me see, we'd only moved out of our old house and moved into this house that we're in now by 1 year. And I remember that the thing that we needed to get done on this house, for me, urgently, was get a new aerial. It had the aerial on the chimney stack, strapped, but this is a house that was made in 1901. I know, because I looked at the deeds. And so it's an oldish house. And that aerial must have been on that roof from around the 50s. And we're in the Midlands here, and it can be very hilly or it can be very flat. And you get there pockets where it's very difficult to get signals. And there's a lot of water around here and all sorts of stuff that can cause problems for strength of signal. I was a big kiddie that was graced with the fact that an American Air Force person flew back to his country and gave me his whole American comic collection. It's what started my dad buying the British edition of the same comic over here. So we're talking about Marvel again. And Marvel UK had just set up in 1973. But we're talking a little bit later on. So I was great delight of seeing the American comics, and in those comics they had adverts. They had all those adverts about buy X-ray glasses, sea monkeys, all of that sort of stuff. But they also had Saturday TV in the States, and Saturday TV in the States always seemed to have all these wonderful cartoons that we didn't really get over here, or if we did, they came across much later. Or they weren't in a Saturday block. Let me see. I remember seeing The Perils of Penelope Pitstop, Scooby-Doo, and all of those. But there were these Marvel ones. So the comic book I was reading was in a cartoon form. Now later on, I found out that they weren't very good, and the ones from the 60s were especially looked upon quite poorly because there was no real animation in them. What they'd done, they'd taken the comic, froze a panel, and then moved the mouth or something and applied a voice. But they kept the adaptation of the story close to the comic, which is what I would have liked. And later on, I did. In fact, you can't see, but that little white box, see, can I get it? There. Oh, just there is the 4 DVD box set of the Marvel Action Hour that was shown in the 60s. But I always wanted to see Spider-Man. And Spider-Man was released in limited form to the ITV network, but it generally tried to mimic what BBC did by putting a small animated cartoon just before the news. So on the BBC, that would be like Thomas the Tank Engine, Willow the Wisp. In certain areas of ITV, Spider-Man would be one of those, because you can break Spider-Man from the 60s down into 2 parts, because they usually used to have 2 stories, and it was 22 minutes long, which meant that each story was 10 minutes when you count out the credits and the music. So I had to do, and this is where technology comes in again. I knew how to pull the little flap down on the telly, choose number 6 or something on the channel changer, which I knew wouldn't be used because we only had 3 channels, BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV, and we had a little plastic screwdriver that was in there, and you could actually put the screwdriver into the hole and change the UHF frequencies. And what I would do is I would move it very, very slowly in the very low bands, the 30s, 40s. And as I approached the 50s, I'd go even slower. And sometimes I'd get a very, very speckly picture. So I'd be picking up TV broadcasts that were only supposed to have been seen by, HTV or, Norwich. I picked up signals from Norwich, which is a good 200 miles away in a totally different receiver. And all I had to do was look in a magazine, the TV Times, and it would show you what the regional variants would be. And I knew that Spider-Man was being shown at 6:15 on Saturday in that particular area. And so there I would be at 6 o'clock going, I will tune this in. I will get to it. So I really hope that answers your question. It was a very lovely memory for me to remember tuning in a TV and how we used to tune it. That's that's a thing I used to do. Of course, we've got auto-tuning now and satellites and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully that was good for you, Robert. And Merry Christmas to you, and Merry Christmas to Denny, and who have I gone past? Merry Christmas to GTB. I'll have to keep saying that now at the end. So we come to Milfy. Now, Milfy's a great character, and he has been sending me questions all this year, and has had some bad luck at the end of this year, which has meant that we've missed his questions. But You know, life moves on, and I'm happy to report that he says that things are now starting to get back to normal, and I do hope that normal is good for Milfy, because normal can be bad. You know, your normal could be a bad place, so I'm hoping it's a good one for you. So his question, he gave me a quick question. Which films that are considered true classics and are generally loved by the general public do you think are overrated? Or are there any films you have watched that you did not get fully the first time you saw them? Perhaps you were too young to appreciate them. Yeah, that's very true. Or you were in the wrong frame of mind. But now you look upon them and said on the said film, and look at the film with joy. Now, as I've mentioned lots and lots of times before, I try not to use the word hate. And I've mentioned many times that I give films that I don't like a second chance. Sometimes I give it a couple of weeks and watch it again. Sometimes it could be years that go by and give it a second chance. Sometimes it's the same day. So you can imagine. I must be in the same... I need to get myself out of the same frame of mind, or out of what I was trying to do when I was watching it that I thought might have interfered with it. Now, if I was to list films that I think are overrated, that are classics, they're probably more because I don't understand it, or people philosophize over it so much that I don't see what the good is in it. So I think I've got a couple in mind. Let's see. So I'm a big appreciator of oldish films. So Citizen Kane comes to mind, and not because it's overrated or anything. It's got its importance. I mean, it really is an important film. It's universally in most polls as being the most influential film of its time, and there were a lot of good spots in it. But from that point of view, it's doomed to failure to be overrated because there's so much glory put on it. So maybe that's a good one to mention. There have been many films that people have said, "Oh, it's great, it's my favourite film," and I look and I find that they're quite high up in lists as well, but they use those horrible expressions like the greatest comedy of all time, the most spectacular film you will see, and all of these wonderful glory words. And I look at it and go, well, it was good, but where'd you get some of these statements from? So, ones that come to mind. Titanic. There we are. A film that had so much praise put on it. So many jokes upon it as well. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can remember that everyone used to come out and say, "I don't want to spoil the ending for you, but it sinks." You know, and spoiler alert, I've just gone and told you what happens in that film. But no, it's just that it seemed to be extremely long for a love story. It's a disaster film, but I just didn't see the attraction to make it one of the biggest earners of that time. I think I've looked back at the past and tried to evaluate, is it because there was nothing on that year? But no, there were some damn good films. There's a lot to say about the clout behind a name, you know, and James Cameron is a big name. You know, it seemed that everything he was filming turned to gold. So it didn't surprise me that it would be up there that year. But from my point of view, I don't see what the big things are. I mean, I've seen all the documentaries about how the special effects were done and all of that. But to me, no. I think it's probably because I knew quite an awful lot possibly about the Titanic from books and history and a little bit about the Titanic sister ships and all of that sort of stuff, and how many died and how many survived, and all of that sort of stuff that made the film rather redundant as a drama. And if I was to name films that are similar to that, maybe The Sixth Sense is one to mention. The Sixth Sense is one of those films that has the trappings in its own device. I don't know if you're a little bit like me, but I look forward to watching a film, and I try not to listen to about what other people think about it, and I try sometimes not to know anything about it. So The Sixth Sense, in certain ways, with Bruce Willis, succeeds because I didn't get the twist. There you are, I've said it. I saw it all the way to the end and I went, wow, what a twist. And I love twists. You know, you'll hear me go on and on and on about how, in my memory, Planet of the Apes is as a twist in a film. And I can watch Planet of the Apes over and over again. But I watched Sixth Sense again for a second time, probably about 6 months later. And because I knew the ending, the whole characteristic of the film changed. I did not see what was great about this film. So it was a one-trick wonder. Other people might disagree with me on that, but I can't watch that film again. Unlike Planet of the Apes, I really seriously, and I've watched, I mean, I haven't counted how many times I've watched it. You know, there must be 10, 11, 12 times that I've seen it. But I just don't get any enjoyment. So I hope that's good. And then on a similar aspect again, and this is an unusual one, and that's 16 Candles. John Hughes, yeah. Now, John Hughes, again, is another one of those ones that I can watch over and over again. Uncle Buck, Planes, Trains and Automobiles, Ferris Bueller's Day Out. But there's something about St. Elmo's Fire. But 16 Candles, I just can't sit through that film. I don't know what it is. It's got a witty script. It's well done. It's got some incredibly famous actors now, not at that time. But I just can't get the gumption. If it's one of those films where if the steel book was coming out of it, I'd buy the normal edition. It's as simple as that. Do you know what I mean? And this is a very strange one, and people will say it's because you like Marvel, but The Dark Knight. Now, Christopher Nolan did a fantastic film, but if you go now and look up The Dark Knight, you'll see because I didn't look too long ago, and it might have changed now, but it was listed as the third greatest film of all time. Seriously? The third greatest film of all time. It's a bloke dressed up as a bat solving crime stories. It's a great superhero flick. It's a popcorn flick. It's incredibly well done. It's incredibly well acted. It is probably one of, and possibly is the best, I'm not going to say it is because it isn't for me, the best superhero film. The greatest film? No. Oh my God, where do people get these terms from? So, and the last one I think is probably because of where my mind was, but Donnie Darko. Now, so many people hype that. Have you ever seen Donnie Darko? Have you ever seen Donnie Darko? And it was one of those sleeper hits at the time, and I remember that. And it had this weird rabbit on the cover of on the poster and on the cover of the rental. But I just didn't get it. It probably ended up being something that of what I thought it was going to be and ended up being something totally different. And that's probably why I count Donnie Darko as one of those films that generally is loved, but I don't really see it. And I hope that's enough films for you, because I had to think deep there. My God. Oh. But it's nice to reminisce. And then we get to Rocket Bunny. Now, Rocket Bunny is I've been talking to him a lot, so I haven't looked at the question purposely, because we've been playing Valheim together on the server. We're making great progress. We can now buy from a vendor in the game and get some of that top stuff that will help us later on with our battles in Norse mythology in Valheim and looking for the Mistlands. So anyway, what did he say? He really liked the beginning part of my blog last week, where I was reminiscing about children's and some science fiction TV that doesn't get discussed very much. Yes, loved that. It's always nice to think back, and my brain was active, really active, for anything that was a bit supernaturally. And so Into the Labyrinth for Children of Stones just naturally came to me. So let's see the question, if I can find it. Here we go. So question for you. What are your views on modern remakes of classic old series? Do you have favourites? Examples off the top of my head. Remakes of Survivors, Day of the Triffids, Lost in Space, V, Quatermass Experiment, that's the Gattis and Tennant version that was on a couple of years ago, Battlestar Galactica, The Twilight Zone, and I could go on and on and on. Yes, we do really love going back, don't we, to TV series that were hot and then put a 2000s stamp on it to show that it wasn't a one-hit wonder. And I don't know what the balance is. I keep thinking of the justice balance in London, on whether it's a 50-50 split of whether it works or not. But I know the ones I hate, I can name them off very quickly like that, because I was talking the other day about the Tomorrow People, and I was reminded that it was remade, and just before the children's drama department disbanded and moved into their own channels, rather than being something that would be on ITV in a set time before the news. The Tomorrow People, the remake, was atrocious. Now, the Tomorrow People was aged when you look at the 70s version, and I made that quite clear last week. But you've got to remember that I was looking at it then with child eyes, and from that point of view it was magical. But the new Tomorrow People, it was just atrocious. The sets were equally as bad as they were back then, but the stories were worse. They hadn't thought about anything really in regards to racism that they could have brought into it too much. Even Marvel Comics signify that the X-Men works because they are considered to be unique, and we don't like unique. We don't like things that are different colour and different language and different. And so the Tomorrow People had a lot that they could have brought into the new world, and no, didn't. And I go through my Sky remote right now, and I see these horrible programs. Hawaii Five-O's got to be one of the ones. Now, I was very excited about Hawaii Five-O because there was a documentary about it coming back, and I went, oh, now this could either go really well or really bad. And they were showing all the old clips, of Steve McGarrett and that famous, almost like the Tomorrow People, where I talked about that stop motion sort of like photography of zooming in to the top of a building, and there was Steve McGarrett, and he just turns his head and smiles at the camera, and Jack Lord, his name would come up. And then you'd see all those other images, of grass skirts and all sorts of stuff. Now, when they were saying that this was coming out, they said that they'd got the original music artists that made the theme tune back together to do a retake of the new Hawaii Five-0. And I purposely remember that if you look on YouTube and you put new Hawaii Five-0 theme, you'll see that, and it comes up at the beginning and it says, here they are, that was definitely the guitarist, that was the trumpet player and all that sort of stuff. And then they play the music and it all comes back, that famous drum sound and those famous brass instruments playing the Hawaii Five-0 tune. And if you're not right now got the Hawaii Five-0 tune in your head, there's something wrong with you. Da, 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 and it's in my head right now. So this was a snippet that says this is coming in the next month, and I was going, great. And I watched it and I went, this isn't a Hawaii Five-0 that I remember. And it's almost like they'd militarized it in the first season. And then I just couldn't go back to it. It's even there now, and sometimes I'll put it on and I'll go, I don't know these people. It's just something off. There's something off about it. And then in equal measure of disdain, Magnum. So we all know Magnum, and we know how it was for us in the 80s. That Ferrari, the British owner of the house, and then Magnum was just that private eye who knew a famous rich person on the island, and he's a private eye, and it's a great show. We all love it, and there's the Doberman dog pinchers, It's just a great show, and then there's the music, which you just can't get away from. And there's that, and you see the helicopter dip, and it starts the music for Magnum. This show, it's just awful. Let's just leave it there. The latest Magnum is awful. And then on a sort of a lighter note, and just for me, damn low light, I saw the French version of the remake of War of the Worlds after the BBC had also updated War of the Worlds last year, or was it the year before? And I didn't take to either of them, really. They weren't bad. The French one was the hardest one for me to do. Not because it was subtitled or anything like that. It was I think it was about 5 or 6 episodes. And War of the Worlds for the BBC production was literally 2 or 3. 2, I think it was. And every time I watch anything that's got the word War of the Worlds in it, I've got the Jeff Wayne's music going in on one side of my brain, and I've got on the other side of my brain the 50s film or me reading the book as a teenager. So when I'm starting to watch something that's been remade, it's very hard for me to see the changes. And so the BBC one was more closest to what I thought wasn't too bad, because Victorian England, all of that sort of stuff, mass explosions when you wouldn't have expected it because it was Victorian era. Well, turn of the century, should I say, of the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th. So I didn't really get on with those 2 remakes, but they weren't bad. In fact, they weren't horrible. But you wanted to know about ones that I do like. Well, that's easy. Twilight Zone isn't bad. It's now had 2 seasons. I still don't get on with the narrator, probably because I don't really recognise him. But I like the fact that they've tried to mix in stories that they've told before and new stories. And with Rod Serling dying, for the most part of these 2 seasons, the executive producer has been Rod Serling's daughter, I believe. I think she died, but I'd have to check that, about a year ago. And I haven't seen a third season of The Twilight Zone yet. But The Twilight Zone has been remade several times. It's always had a mixed response from its first incarnation in black and white, and that's the one that I'll always go back to. And I think that's probably its biggest Achilles heel. How can you better something that was quintessentially at its best when it was being broadcast back then? But I still love it when they try, because it's great. And then you got to remember The Outer Limits was only ever 2 seasons, but when they brought that back in the 90s, it went to 6 or 7 seasons, and they weren't bad at all. So I love that remake. And I've seen many remakes of Quatermass, Day of the Triffids, like you've mentioned. I know a lot of people don't like Battlestar Galactica's remake, but I liked it. I thought that was alright, to be quite honest. And I wish I was younger, because I'd really, really like to... What I mean by really like, I like it already. But I'd really would like, is the new version of Wurzel Gummidge, which crops up now and again on Christmas, which is why I mention it, because I'm not quite sure if it's on today. But they remade Wurzel Gummidge on BBC One, and it's really probably more closer to the book, but nothing like it's not really like the John Pertwee that I know, which, by the way, gets a Blu-ray release next week. The complete Wurzel Gummidge. So I think it's done well enough for me to go, that's not bad either. So I hope that's all right for you, Rocket. We'll move to Jam Bomb. Like I say, sometimes it's difficult to find the questions. But I think I found it. So just want to say Merry Christmas to you, Jam Bomb. Merry Christmas to you, Rocket. Thank you so much for keeping me sane this year. Jam Bomb's been great now. I'll do probably a reflection video, being as it's New Year's Day next week. And so we went to a pinball fest this year. But his question is, what do you think are some of the best things about living in Britain these days? And whereabouts in Britain would you most like to live if money was no issue and you had no family ties? An interesting question, but I think we've lost a little bit of pathos, if you see what I mean, in regards to, we used to be very proud and go best of British and you can't get better than British and all of that sort of stuff. It's probably because all the rest of the world goes you can, and here's an example of something that is worse in Britain. Oh, there we go. It is worse than Britain. But we've got a lot to like. The National Health Service, although in disarray, if we didn't have that, just think how bad that would be. Where would I like to live? Well, you see, I wish I'd have spread my wings a little bit more, because I've only ever really lived where I'm at now, at Manchester. But I've been to London and spent a lot of time there. In fact, I've spent more than like 2 weeks holiday there or something. I mean, I was there for 3 months working for a friend of mine called Sarah L. Smith & Co. She had an accountancy in Finchley Road. So I was there for a good couple of months. This was back in my Amiga days, so late 80s. But I've been to places like Newcastle and Leeds and so forth, but haven't experienced it enough to say, would I love to live there? And where I live, the Cotswolds, the Midlands, it's beautiful. And you've got that lovely thing that I think a lot of people want, which is the quietness of the countryside and the beauty, and a road that takes you to where all the action is, and the fast-paced nature of a city or a town. So I'm not that far away from a theatre or a nightclub or a cinema or a bowling alley, and I'm certainly in a lovely area that's full of hills and grass and scenery and lovely coloured rocks and all of that sort of stuff. So I think I'm happy where I am, really, Jambon, and I can't really see me now at my age moving. Although you didn't ask whether I'd like to go to a foreign country, and then that situation changes. Then we get to Steve's Gaming. Now, we always do the salute to Steve. Steve, have a Merry Christmas, mate. You've absolutely been a spot-on friend. I love your channel, you know that. And I wish you well a great Merry Christmas. I hope the new year brings you good fortune. You bastard. Right, questions for you. I'm dreading this now. You know what you've been like to me this year, Steve. TV adverts. Why were they good in the 70s and utterly crap now? It cannot purely be my age. Adverts used to be okay, but look at TV now. The adverts are all yelling and screaming or just utterly bizarre, and you don't even know what they're advertising. Surely it's just not me. And I agree, I think the rot started about 10 years ago for me. And drumming into my head every 30 seconds is maybe it's Maybelline, or maybe she's born with it, or whatever. Drove me bonkers. But as a kiddie, when I was watching the children's stuff, it was geared towards all the toys. There was the He-Man toys, Stretch Armstrong toys, Evel Knievel toys, the latest electronic board games like Simon and Merlin, and the advert for Big Track and Operation the Mad Doctor's Game and Mousetrap and all of that sort of stuff. And then when it came to the bigger adverts, there was the Martini adverts and Campari adverts and Milk Tray, and, you know, being James Bond, you know, Milk Tray adverts, and the Turkish Delight and the Flake adverts, and they were all, when you look back at it now and you find out, you find out now that all of those people that made those adverts are now big film directors. The Hovis advert is famous because that's Ridley Scott. However, it did have some crap in there. Can't turn around and say, you know, there wasn't, because there was. But yes, one of the things that I do at Christmas is look on YouTube and find the Christmas adverts at the time. I do it every year. And there is nothing that makes me smile more than seeing one particular year's Woolworth advert, which had just about every guest star going it. It must have had the goodies in it. It must have had, you know, stars from, you know, like, I'm trying to think of the names now, and it's annoying me because I've got all of their faces in my mind. They didn't have obviously things like Cannon and Ball, but they had comedians of the time, presenters of the time, dancers, singers, all advertising cassette tapes and so forth. And it was called Have a Happy Christmas, Woolworth's Shopping Spree. And I think we're talking 1982-83. And it even has the lovely snippet of a Vectrex and a Vic-20. And then the hi-fis of the time, you know, the Amstrad hi-fis and K-Tel records. The only thing missing from it would be the pick and mix. Do you know what I mean? Which we all loved at Woolworths. So, I don't know why they're so bad this year, adverts, and as far as I'm concerned, the last decade. But they are. And I might even do a section of favourite adverts because there are just so many of them, you know, even as boring as ones as the bird's eye, you know, and the curly whirlies and the, you know, the dairy milk adverts, you know, because they're my childhood and they're my teens growing up. And you know, I learned an awful lot from advertising. You know, even to a Durex advert. You know, I mean, I was a kid growing up. I went, what's that? And then found out, you know, it's adverts. They have so much of a thing. There's so much of a stallment of what makes me me, because they were always there and they were always in the background as well, just in the background. So question 2, what's your favourite soft drink and why? I love milkshakes, the thicker the better, and yes, I'm aware I'm an old guy that should drink beer, but no. Actually, I didn't think of you as being an old guy, Steve, even though I know that you are ancient. I thought milkshakes you liked because you got no teeth left. But no, what's my... you know I'm only joking. What's your favourite soft drink? Well, I drink lots of soft drinks. I mean, right now I'm going to have a sip of my orange juice. Lovely. And nothing brought a bigger smile onto me than going into a cafe and having a very, very thick milkshake. You know, the type that you used to get in McDonald's, where it wouldn't even go up the straw. Your cheeks would all suck in because you can't get the bloody milkshake into your gob. And so I used to love a milkshake, but I don't have them often enough now. In fact, the last time I had a milkshake like that must be 5 years. And if you make those Nesquik thick shakes, which is just coloured, it's just flavoured milk, to be quite honest, it goes down your throat too quick. It's not thick, it's not the same. But the old regime comes here where it's very easy now to buy a tray of Diet Coke or a tray of Coke or a tray of Fanta or a tray of Dr. Pepper or whatever. And so they then become like near enough like water. So I'm with you. Milkshake would possibly be my favourite, but I haven't had one in years, and now I want one, you bastard. How's that for an answer? And thank you so much, and a Merry Christmas to you, Steve. You've been absolutely wonderful this year. And then we get to Colin Jones. Good old Colin Jones. You know him. He's our train guy. He very, very busy person. Always bullet points my video blogs. But he's been, at this time of year, he's probably been at his busiest. So he's got a question for me, and that's really great because he's had difficulty finding the time, and I totally appreciate it. And I just thank you for supporting me, Colin. So that's brilliant. My question for next blog: I've been having some nightmare with customer support of many companies this month, with one notable exception. Have you experienced the sharp drop in the levels of customer support provided these days compared to how they used to be? And remember, I used to be in customer support because I was in the IT support area, and I used to pick up the calls for iSoft, which was the support for the doctor's surgery and the software that they use, and even the probation. I picked up the phone for them when their laptops weren't working and so forth, and their account had just started, etc., etc. And so therefore I've had a good training of being a customer support agent. I think the difficulty now is there's an influx now of people that work on customer support that don't really know what is expected of a customer support person, and they've never worked in an office and are working at home at the moment because business has now changed their model around to being equally working at home and equally working in an office. Now, my training was always in an office. I had a dual headset on, and I had to listen to my supervisor answer calls, see how he wrote or she wrote the entry up in the logging software, and then how that was prioritized and then moved to other departments to get done. And I therefore also learnt about the tricks of the trade on not putting someone on hold, or how to put someone on hold and make them not upset about it. You learn all of that. And I think because of being a little bit green around the gills, that they don't know quite how to handle you. They will read from a script. If you go off script, they get their brain freezes or clears, or they'll mention something that they want to do for you, but actually they can't, and they know they can't, but they don't know how to say it to you or to your face that that's never going to happen, leading you on, in other words. But some of the customer support I've picked up has been atrocious just recently, but I think it's been on a downward spiral, and it's not. I'm not going to use the old cliche where we've outsourced it to India and all of that sort of stuff, because there are some award-winning customer service stuff out there that are in India, and I can tell you that now, because we looked at outsourcing at one point, and I spoke to the guys, and some of these people that I spoke to, and this is when I'm in my days during iSoft, they could have written the program that they were supporting. Seriously, they could. They knew exactly why something had gone wrong with the medication, say, of a person. They looked at the audit trail and used SQL to find out why that medication was prescribed when it shouldn't have been, and so forth and so forth. And most of the time you find out it's because they've been fiddling about with the database, with text editors and all sorts of stuff. So I've had many experiences of bad, and mostly I feel sorry sometimes for the support person. I always say at the end, if I've had good customer services, please send me that survey. I believe you have helped me today. You've used empathy. Thank you very much. Feel free to send that survey. I'll gladly fill it in. And then there are other ones where I basically said, you've heard what I've been saying, but you haven't listened. Yeah, you hear with your ears, you listen with your brain. You haven't used your brain once, arsehole. But I'm one of those people that I don't get abusive. I just say, look, the one thing I'm not going to do is have an argument with you, or or rant at you. It's not your fault. It's how your company works, and it's how your company supports us, which is atrocious. And bad examples would be Eagle Moss. They were terrible. Every time I spoke to them, they were the worst. But there we go with that. And then I just want to answer a question from Wee Bob from last week, because he asked a question and I didn't do it. Now I need to look at my notes, because it's not because I don't know the answer. It's because I happen to mention the name of a book, and I'm not very good with names. Hopefully I can find it. Yeah, so his question, don't want to lose my place, was about Alien and the Aliens franchise. So he put, in the Alien franchise, the modern day movies pose that aliens were created as a weapon of mass destruction. Was this a story route you thought they would go down? And then question 2, do you like reading books? Have you read Alien Phalanx? And it was an interesting question, and I'm sorry I didn't get to it. But it's just that when I went to see Alien, I went to see it as a young man, a young guy. And I saw it for the scares. and it was just like a monster of the week on a big screen. And then Aliens turned it from being a singular experience into a more warlike experience. And the underlying thing that came from James Cameron's film was, where did they come from? Why are they here? So I didn't see them as being something as a creature of mass destruction, because I thought they live like why I live. I mean, where did I come from? Other than I know I came from my mother's womb, what I'm saying is, where did we come from? You know, that big spark that started the whole of the universe. You know what I mean? And what other life is out there? So I just looked at them as being another creature that we've never come across before, misunderstood, and seemed to be very protective of themselves. Well, take it like this: there's a frog, isn't there, in the jungle, that's so colourful that if you eat it, its poison will kill you. That's its defence mechanism. The aliens have got acid for blood. Well, see what I mean? It's a defence mechanism. It's just what makes them, their DNA, what they are. So no, I didn't see what Ridley was trying to do in regards to that they were genetically engineered to be the way that they were supposed to be. I suppose I should have done, and I think it's a good opportunic window for a good story. Hasn't turned out that way just yet, because most people hate the newer films, but they're still visually appealing to me. But your second question is more of a harder one for me to answer, to be quite honest, because it's not really a yes/no question. It's because you say, do I like reading books? Well, of course I do. And have I read Alien Phalanx? And the answer to that is no, I didn't. And I had to look it up, and it's by Scott Seiler. Is that Seiler? Made in 2020, and is a novel, and I think it's part of a trilogy. It's the second one of a trilogy. So, like I say, you opened my eyes to something that I haven't read. Because when I was watching the Alien film, I looked forward to the comic book adaptation. And then there was all of the stuff in Starburst. And then there was another take in comic book that Dark Horse did. And even Marvel got the license to the Alien franchise. And then that's when graphic novels suddenly took on. And of course, there have been spin-off stories that are canon and non-canon. This carries on from the film. This is in another part of the universe, 3,000 light years away from what we know of the alien universe, and so forth and so forth. And I just never really got the time to read novels. Graphic novels are very quick. You can read through them very, very quickly, and you can get an essence of a good story. And a novel, just, I need that time. And I might go away after this and look and see whether there's any audio books, and I'm pretty sure they're all on audio book, and I might start to listen to a couple of them, because we know now the alien universe as it is, because of the films that we've watched. I know them as well, the separate stories, because of the games that we've played, the video games, and the comic books that I've read. So I'm open totally to reading something that's not just always about Ripley. So yeah, I think I'll do that. So then we get to just the last part, TV and so forth. So I've watched Willow, episode 5. It's going along okay, nothing bad with that. I watched a film yesterday, The Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery, which was on Netflix. Knives Out was a film that came out last year, sort of like an Agatha Christie type thing. And this one wasn't too bad either. It's got this, Daniel Craig and everybody all back, quite good. And then I watched Alice in Borderland. which is a bit like Squid Game. Squid Game was a phenomenon about 18 months ago, I think, where people were taken off of the streets to win a potload of money, but they had to survive the game. Alice in Borderland is similar. If you like Squid Game, you'll get enjoyment out of it. If you won't, it won't change your mind. And then I watched a lovely thing that would probably bore the pants off of you. I think Steve might have even seen it, actually. It was called Goodnight Oppie. Now, the reason it's called Goodnight Oppie is because it tells the story of the Mars rover that was called Opportunity. Now, the Mars rover went up to Mars and was supposed to do a job for 90 days. It ended up working for 16 years. So it was a very solar orientated rover with lots of electronics for sampling soil and all that sort of stuff. And nobody in their right mind thought that this flimsy device would last beyond 90 days. And it did that easily, the 90 days. And NASA continued to communicate with it. And it was going 16 years later. So, Goodnight Oppie I watched. It was on Netflix, and I really thoroughly enjoyed that. And that's pretty much the end, because other than it's Christmas, and I've done all the things that I'm pretty sure you guys have done. I've watched Christmas Vacation, I've watched The Muppets Christmas Carol, I've watched Scrooge, I'm geared to watch It's a Wonderful Life. And I looked in my diary on why I watched It's a Wonderful Life so many times. And for some unknown reason, I wrote this down for the second time that I'd watched the film. And it says in my diary entry, I love this line, I must remember. And it says, there's a quote in a book in the film, and it says, no man is a failure who has friends. And as I said last week, it's one of those important stories that says you are who you are, you're important, you have a voice. What would it be like if you weren't there? That is a very pertinent line. No man is a failure who has friends, and you're all my friends. I don't know any way else to say it. And like I say, I had so much that I wanted to say. Take it like this. I watched a film last night, Tales from the Crypt. Now, why are you watching Tales from the Crypt Christmas Eve? A Hammer horror film from 1972. And then I put it on because I just fancied a horror, really, from all the Christmas nicety. And lo and behold, Joan Collins is in it, being attacked by a Santa. She'd killed her husband, she was trying to hide the body, and at the same time this crazed person from a psychiatric ward had escaped with a Santa outfit, and the radio broadcast said lock all your windows and that. And Joan Collins was so trying to get rid of this body, she'd managed to close all the windows when her little daughter came from upstairs downstairs and said, I found Santa outside, Mummy, and I've let him in. And it was just great. And so Santa gets about even in horror films. And with that, I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much. Next, and there will be a next, by the way, because remember, Christmas is not my reflection time. Christmas is the time where I'm thankful for this year. New Year is the gateway to the future and the reflection of the past. I'll be looking at my channel, thinking about what I can do better, or whether I continue. But I do want to thank you for looking at my game that I played this week, Audio Surf. That was a joy to do because it incorporated music. And I just want to give the answers now. The first tune is The Early Bird by Ron Goodwin. The second one is an incidental track from Street Hawk. that isn't Tangerine Dream, but is done by, I believe, the sound engineer on the album of Le Parc. And the third one was Hunchback 2 from Ocean. I think you can find that track in a much better version from C64 Audio on an album called Project Galway. That one just happened to be a remix by somebody, but it wasn't too bad and it was nice and boppy. And Audio Surf, didn't that get me through a few Christmases? It definitely did. And I might do one more of those games that got me through Christmas, because there have been many where I've had to not reflect and try to take my mind off of things that have been bad in that year. And just to put another date stamp on this video, I went back to work this week. It went very well, thank you very much. I was supposed to be there for 4, it lasted 3 days. It was a bittersweet time, mostly sweet. There was a bitterness at the end of my 3 days. But nothing that's going to sway me from doing a good job. And as you know, on the last thing that we do, the very last thing, is stuff that have turned up. And remember, there's a Royal Mail strike on at the moment. There were 9 parcels I was waiting for last week. There are still 4 out there that didn't make it. And a couple of those were Christmas presents. So I've had to apologise to family members that haven't got them. So what's arrived this week? So there's Kick-Ass, the 4K release. It's not an Arrow, this one's Universal, but they've done a wonderful steel job with extras in a hard book case, so that's really lovely. Looking forward to that. That's another comic book turned into a film. Shrek 2 4K release. I've got a soft spot for Shrek, take it like that. I still probably think the first one is the best, but yeah, the second one's very good. Hot Fuzz, part of the trilogy that Simon Pegg brought out. We all know it started off with Shaun of the Dead. Hot Fuzz is a bit underrated, really. Then we've got the 4K release of Candyman, because I love a little bit of horror. Just don't say his name too many times. And the highlight is Silent Running in a huge steelbook collector's edition. The amount of description on the back there telling you what is in this, what makes this release. It's just, I've been waiting a long time to get a 4K transfer of this film. Many memories all the way back to Moviedrome. And then in the post, it finally arrived. My 1917 film from the Film Vault. It's number 4. That means I've got all 4. And again, just like before, lobby cards, the crystal that's individually numbered. There are 3,000 of these. Merry Christmas, my friends. And you've listened to my waffle now 44 times. And I do hope you're around for a lot more. Have a great one, and see you on New Year's Day. Bye-bye.